Are you curious what it's like to do back-to-back cruises? Are you wondering, do you have to get off the ship? Or do my charges roll over from one sailing to the next? Or do I have to settle my charges between sailings? Well, before doing my first back-to-back cruise, I had the same questions. And in today's video, I'm telling you all about back-to-back cruises and what to expect based on my personal experience. Hi, I'm Danielle Hill with Hello Horizon Travel, and I am on my very first back-to-back cruise, or at least back-to-back on the same ship from the same port. And this is part of my Christmas cruise. This is filmed in 2023, December 2023. And so today we're talking all about back-to-back cruises. So let's get all the questions that I've had, that you probably have also, answered. First up, a little bit of background information. A back-to-back cruise, as I'm referring to in this video, is a cruise where you travel on two consecutive itineraries on the same ship from the same port. It could be in the same stateroom or different staterooms for the two sailings, but basically you go on a cruise, and when everyone's getting off the ship after that first cruise ends, you stay on for the next sailing. And we'll get into the details of whether or not you're actually allowed to stay on the ship the whole time, but basically you don't disembark and leave and complete your cruise experience. You are part of the next sailing as well. So for my consecutive cruises, or back-to-back cruises, I did a 4-day followed by a 7-day down to Mexico from the port of Los Angeles. And for this cruise, we stayed in the same cabin for both itineraries, which makes it a lot easier actually. As part of your back-to-back experience, or as Princess calls it, your in-transit experience, a few things happen. First, before the end of the first cruise, you'll get a letter, and that's your in-transit letter with 2 in-transit cards, or 1 in-transit card per person. We had 2 people, so we got 2 cards. You'll also be invited to an in-transit reception, which is just a meeting where they go over the information in the letter and answer any questions that you have. We did attend the in-transit meeting, and I actually really recommend it, even if you've done an in-transit before with Princess or with another cruise line, for a couple of reasons. One, they have free drinks, so even if you have the drink package, you can get free drinks and it doesn't count towards your limit, and so that's a perk. Another benefit to attending the in-transit meeting is to meet the staff. You're able to meet leadership of different staffs, from restaurant to excursions, spa, and several others as well. You're able to get any questions that you have answered from them directly. An unexpected perk of attending the in-transit reception was that we got some exclusive deals, or access to some exclusive sales for in-transit for excursions, as well as the spa. So I highly recommend going there. They'll give you information on how to redeem those rewards or perks for being an in-transit guest. Of course, in addition to the other things that I've mentioned, you're able to meet other passengers in transit. And for the cruise that we were on, there were about 95 people in transit. And for some sailings, there are significantly more, and some there are less. But the cruise that we were on, there were about 95 passengers, and probably only like maybe 25% attended the reception, but we were able to meet them and get to know them as well as the staff. Another perk that I want to mention is that for dining, you are able to, if you dine in the main dining room on Princess in your first cruise or during your first cruise, and you really like the dining room, the wait staff, as well as the table, you are able to reserve that same table and that same dining room at the same time each night. And so we did that here aboard the Discovery Princess. There are 3 dining rooms. They're Alaska themed, so I love it. There's Juneau, Ketchikan, and Skagway. And we had a recurring dinner reservation in Ketchikan. And it really allowed us to get to know our wait staff. And the best part of all, one of the best parts, was that even with a reservation here on Princess at the time of this recording, you have to wait in line. So say you have a 7 o'clock reservation like we did. Before we got this in-transit perk at the very beginning of our first cruise, and before we were aware of this, we at 7 o'clock would be in line waiting with everyone else that had a 7 o'clock reservation. But once we told them that we were in transit and they noted down our table and time that we requested in the waiter for every night, we were able to walk straight into the dining room, back to our designated table, and skip the line. So that was a really great perk and definitely saved time and just expedited the process of getting a table and starting the dinner for the evening. I hope you're getting value out of this video. If so, press the like button and leave me a comment. Let me know if you've done a back-to-back cruise, how your experience was, and if you haven't but would like to, let me know that and where you would like to go on your back-to-back cruise. Okay, now that we've laid the groundwork, let's get into the questions that I had, that you probably have, and also some that came up in the in-transit meeting that I hadn't even thought of. Let's get to it. On Princess, to access your stateroom or your cabin and to make purchases on the voyage, and really for access to everything, you use a medallion. A lot of cruise ships will use a card similar to a hotel key, but on Princess they use what's called a medallion. When you're sailing back to back, you may be wondering, do I need a new medallion? The answer is no. You use the same medallion for all of the cruises. So one medallion for 2 sailings. Does my onboard credit roll over? Yes, your onboard credit rolls over from the first cruise to the second cruise, or any consecutive cruises if you do more than 2 cruises. Do I have to settle my charges at the end of the first voyage? No. Any charges that you have from the first voyage will roll over to the second voyage or any consecutive voyages that you have after the first voyage. You don't have to settle your account until the end of your very last sailing. The one exception to this is the casino. You do have to settle your casino account in between each cruise. That does not roll over. Another thing they mentioned is that your medallion will possibly not work up to 24 hours between the end of the first sailing and the beginning of the next sailing. So there's like a 24-hour buffer where your medallion may not work, but you can still gamble during that time. They'll give you a card that you can use, and they'll track the charges and the winnings based on that, or using that card. Do I need to pack up my room? So this question is a little bit more complicated. First, let's assume that you will be in the same stateroom from one sailing to the next. So like we did, we were in the very same stateroom on the first sailing as the second sailing. And so for us, we did not have to do a single thing to our room. Our room was turned over that morning just like it had been every other day, but we didn't need to pack up or do anything differently when it came to our room. Now, for those guests in transit that are changing staterooms, so on the first cruise, you're in one stateroom, and on the second cruise, you're in another stateroom, you do have to pack up to an extent. You need to put your clothes and your belongings in your suitcase, and you can leave those inside your room. The staff will move your belongings from your stateroom for your first cruise to your stateroom for your second cruise to you. So you do have to pack up, but it's different than if you were disembarking on the ship. You don't have to bring those bags with you to the next room or leave them outside your door or something like that. One exception to this is clothes or anything hanging in the closet area. The staff will move your suitcases as well as anything that is hanging for you. Anything in drawers or anything like that, you will need to pack up in your suitcase, but anything that is hanging up or in your suitcase, they will move for you from your first stateroom to your second stateroom. Do I have access to my new stateroom immediately if I change staterooms? Yes. Once the second cruise officially begins, you will have access to your stateroom. At that time, your medallion will switch over and it will no longer give you access to the old stateroom, and it will then give you access to the new stateroom. And by that time, the team will have moved your belongings from your old room to your new stateroom. So as soon as that new cruise starts, your things are in your room and your medallion will give you access to that room. This last question is the most popular question. It's, do I have to get off the ship? And before my sailing, I got a lot of mixed information and conflicting information about this topic. The short answer is yes, you do have to get off the ship. In my experience on a cruise that sailed to Mexico from LA in December 2023 with Princess on a Discovery Princess, we did have to get off the ship. Staying on the ship was not an option. If you've done back-to-back cruises and your experience has been different, let me know in the comments. But the process that we had to follow for this particular cruise and this cruise line, for this port and itinerary, we did have to get off the ship. Now that you know that you do have to get off the ship, let's talk about the process. The first option for getting off the ship is to get off the ship with all the other guests in transit. So in your in-transit letter and in the in-transit reception, they'll explain to you this process. There's a meeting place and a meeting time, and all the guests meet there. The staff will lead the in-transit group off the ship through customs, security, and you will wait for the ship to be cleared. And then once the ship is cleared, they've ensured that everyone is off of the ship, then the next sailing will be cleared for onboarding or embarkation. At that time, the in-transit guests are then led back onto the ship, and from there, your next cruise starts. And this happens before all the other guests are loaded on board. So you'll walk past everybody that's outside waiting to get on the ship and dealing with their luggage and all that, and you go past them and get right back on the ship. So for us, it was about 45, maybe 50 minutes, definitely under an hour. It was a relatively quick turnaround, considering that we had to go, for us, all the way from the Princess Theater at the forward part of the ship to the terminal and back on again. A couple things to keep in mind if you choose this option. One, be prepared for a lot of walking. So if you have any mobility challenges or walking may be difficult for you over long stretches of time or long period of time, I would recommend using the assistance option. So there is an option to have assistance if you need a wheelchair or some other sort of support in getting off the ship. They do have accommodations for that. For our sailing, the meeting time was a different place and time to account for the extra time that it would take and the staff that was needed for that support. But I highly recommend considering using this assisted service if you have any difficulty walking or any mobility challenges, because it's difficult to know exactly how far you may have to walk. You do get off the ship, you walk outside, or at least for the LA port, you have to go outside. But you get off the ship, just like everyone else, you go through baggage claim and security and all those things. You don't get your luggage, but you walk past where you would if you were disembarking the ship or this was your final journey. And so for some ports like LA, we just so happened to be back in the same terminal area where we were before. So we kind of had an idea of about how far it would be, but there's no guarantee that that'll be the case. So if there are any challenges with mobility, then I would highly recommend using the option with assistance. Another pro tip, and this one is for parents of small children, I would also recommend bringing a stroller because the walk can be long. If you have to go outside, it could be raining or anything like that, and it'll probably make the process a lot smoother if you bring your stroller. One last thing for the first option of getting off the ship with the in-transit guests, you want to ensure that you bring your in-transit card, and that way if you get separated from the group or if you decide you want to get off the ship and not get back on immediately, with that in-transit card it'll allow you to bypass the line. So with Princess, there's a blue line and a green line depending on how much preparation you've done in advance before you're sailing. It's basically like a standard and expedited boarding process, but you can skip those lines and go back through and board much more quickly with your in-transit card. So be sure to bring that in-transit card, even if you're part of the in-transit group and you're being ushered or led off the ship and back onto the ship by the staff. The second option for getting off the port for in-transit guests is to, again, bring your card. You always have to have your in-transit card, but you can get off the ship that morning as early as the ship arrives at port and it's cleared for disembarkation. You can leave with the other guests and really do anything that you like off the ship, and once you're ready to board back on the ship, you can board, but it has to be once passengers are allowed to board again. And so if you're in transit, the process will be a little bit quicker, but you don't have access to the ship any sooner than the first passengers, which the first passengers will be the in-transit guests as well as any elite or suite guests. But you can get off earlier, but it won't allow you to be back on the ship any sooner than it would otherwise if you were to have taken the second option and gotten off the ship with the in-transit group. So in summary, you can get off the ship and back on with the in-transit group, the staff that will usher you through that process, or you can get off the ship at any time that you'd like with your in-transit card and then get back on once the embarkation process starts again. Final thoughts on back-to-back cruises. One, I highly recommend it. If you are able to, you have the time and the resources, and you love cruising, back-to-back cruising is definitely something that I recommend trying. This is, like I said before, my very first back-to-back cruise on the same ship at the same port. I've done a back-to-back before where I actually did a Caribbean cruise out of Miami and then flew the day I got off the ship to Vancouver for an Alaska cruise, which they were back-to-back, but I had to travel from one port to the other. But this actually was the same port, same ship, so no matter how you do it, I definitely recommend back-to-back cruising. Another thing that I'll say is that it was really nice to have an empty ship. It was short-lived, but once the in-transit guests got back on the ship, there were no other guests on the ship initially, and after about 15 or 20 minutes you started to see a few guests trickle in, and then within, I'd say, an hour or so, the masses and the flood of guests started to come back on the ship. But it was nice to kind of have the ship to yourself, and it was empty and quiet, kind of like the middle of the night or early morning, like now when I'm filming. But though it was short-lived, it was nice and cool to have the ship to ourselves. One other thing I'll say is that honestly it was pretty fun to have in-transit privileges. Like I said, there are specials at the spa and excursions that you are privy to, and the dining. I just loved, honestly, being able to go right past the line and straight to my table where the waiter was waiting for us and knew our names and really got to know us and honestly expected us there every night. That's it for today's video. I hope that this video answered all the questions that you have about back-to-back cruises. If there are any additional questions that I didn't cover, or if this prompted other questions, let me know in the comments. I would be happy to answer those questions either in the comments or even make another video answering questions about back-to-back cruises. I mentioned before, but this was a Princess cruise. As I do back-to-back cruises for other cruise lines, I will give you information about any differences in that process. But any questions that you have about back-to-back cruises, even if it's not about Princess, let me know. I will find the information for you and let you know so that you're informed about your back-to-back cruise. If you would like your back-to-back cruise vacation planned and curated by an experienced team of agents that's done what you're looking to do, we would be happy to serve you at Hello Horizon Travel. Our expertise is at your service. There's a link in the description below for a free consultation to start the process. Thank you for watching today's video all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next video.